speakers and stuff?
I think so. I got 2 speakers for verbal communications, but you said Catherine hadn't signed in yet?
She has not. I just sent her about 15 minutes ago another email telling her she needed to sign in or register before the meeting.
Okay. And then based on what you sent me, I have nobody who is joining us to speak on anything else. Is that correct?
Not that they've identified, they've just said they may wish to speak. So we'll have to watch for the raise hand.
Okay. Are you going to be doing that? Aaron's going to be doing that? Who's Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Cinco de Mayo meeting of the Town Council. I'm going to ask Ms. Shelley Neese to take a roll call.
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Sayoc.
Here.
Councilmember Spector.
He's still muted.
Councilmember Rennie.
Here.
Vice Mayor Spector. Ms. Spector, you were muted. Can you please say it again?
I can. I am here.
Mayor and Chair
Jensen. Oh, and I'm here. Yes, Mayor and Chair Jensen is here. Thank you very much. Welcome to our exciting Zoom platform that we're trying out for the first time today. We would normally, during this week and at this meeting, take the time to recognize our Parks and Public Works with a proclamation because it's Parks and Public Works Week. And normally we also bring out the big trucks and open up our yard down on Miles so that the kids can come and see it. It's sad that we can't do that this year, but we can still recognize our Parks and Public Works employees and directors along with our municipal clerks and our building and safety people for our Building and Safety Month. And I have a little proclamation here. can kind of see it on TV. It doesn't glare, but this is what we would be presenting if we were presenting in person. And the reason I wanted to do this, even though we weren't having a personal presentation, is that especially during this time in the shelter-in-place order and the COVID-19, which I call it difficulty, our town employees and our public parks and public works, our clerks, our building and safety have been working from home, working their regular jobs, and working extra to innovate so that we can still provide services. The Parks and Public Works is out working to keep our streets safe and our town in shape, and in fact, getting it ready when hopefully we can open again. Our municipal clerks have been working really hard. Ms. Neese has been working hard on all the platforms we're doing to enable these meetings to take place and have a big role in figuring out how to get this going tonight for our Zoom. So thank you to Ms. Neese. And our building and safety department and along with our planning has been working extra hard to come up with creative ideas so that services can be provided in that area even at this time. So we're having online and electronic building inspections, online permitting for processing for building, taking applications, responding to questions and issues. We're not at the point yet where we're up and running with our commissions, but I think Ms. Pavetti is going to talk about that. But I just wanted to recognize on behalf of the council all of those workers who have been out there really innovating and providing us services during this time. So thank you very much to all of you. And with that, Mr. Schultz, is there a closed session report?
There's no closed session to report.
Thank you. And as I have been during this time, I'm going to start with Ms. Pavetti for the manager matters, then move to council. So Ms. Pavetti.
Thank you, Mayor. As you noted, town staff are very busy implementing the recent public health order that went into effect yesterday, as well as continuing to provide essential government services to our residents and businesses. A couple of updates with the new public health order. There was some easing, so now construction activities are allowed. We've updated our community development website, so we urge families and contractors and others who have a construction project to please consult our website for updates and obtain the best information as to how to go forward. While there was some easing for other activities, please note that town facilities that contain pickleball courts and tennis courts remain closed. Given our resources, we are just not able to open those at this time. In addition, we're all very excited, of course, that the governor is announcing new phases, but we do need to remember that here in Santa Clara County, we are governed by our county public health order. So that really is the priority. Town staff are very eager to get our community members' ideas about how we can continue to streamline our processes. So we do encourage those innovations to come forward, but we do need to remember that it's the county's order that is in effect, and our town council does not have the authority to override that. As always, please check our COVID dedicated website for updates, how you can volunteer, how you can help your neighbors, as well as how you can find assistance if you need it for your businesses or families. And with that, I'll turn it back to the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pavetti. And now is the time for council members to share whatever information they have that's of interest to the public and the entire council. Often that's meetings. We haven't had a lot of those unless people are doing things on Zoom, but I'm going to go to each council member and inquire if they have something to report for council matters. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I continue to participate in the county's COVID updates presented by Dr. Cody. Thank you.
Councilmember Rennie.
Thank you. Fourth week was a bit slow. As mentioned last time, I'm continuing to deliver groceries for West Valley Community Services to seniors that don't wish to leave their homes. And that is one of the organizations that we are supporting with our extra dollars. Also, Last week, I started delivering hot lunches for Live Oak Nutrition, also to seniors in the Parr Avenue area, since they're unable to do the normal come to the Methodist Church for their lunch. I've been helping to deliver lunches, and that's it for me.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sayoc.
Thank you. During this time, I've been working with the League of Cities to ensure that any federal and/or state legislation is applicable to the town of Los Gatos as well as the county. And in addition, the Cities Association worked on a 15-city letter that was signed by all mayors, shared with the county, asking for more collaborative information, including testing, and that is published and should be available to all if you had read the Mercury News.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sayoc. Following up on that, this past Friday, I participated in a Zoom meeting with those 15 mayors and Supervisors Cindy Chavez and Joe Smithian and County Executive Jeff Smith to get some information regarding testing, contact tracing, PPE equipment. Basically, what are those things that we need to be able to get going by the end of May, if not sooner, based on what the governor says, and what the county is doing and how we can help to make sure that those hurdles are all met. So I got some information that was shared on my mayor's message briefly on Monday. We have another meeting scheduled for Friday. This follows the Board of Supervisors meeting that took place today, where we expect to get more information, which we will again share. We expect that to be interesting because it will come after whatever it is that Governor Newsom announces on Thursday. So given that, we are going to move to our consent calendar. So far as I know, I've definitely had requests to pull item 8. Councilman Rennie.
I'd like to pull item 7, please, the emergency proclamation continuation.
Okay. Any other member of the council wish to pull any item from consent, which now it is 1 through 14 with 7 and 8. 1 through 13, excuse me, with 7 and 8 pulled. Any other requests to pull an item? We have not received, except by our written communications, I'm going to ask Ms. Neese, a request to pull an item from the consent other than 8. Is that correct, Ms. Neese?
That is correct.
Okay. So I will entertain a motion on the remaining consent calendar, and we'll hear those items that are pulled in their normal order. So is there a motion on the consent calendar? Councilman Rennie?
I'll move the consent calendar consistent of items 1 through 13 without items 7 and 8.
Is there a second? Councilwoman Sayoc seconds. Even though I can see you and you can see me, we're still doing roll call votes. So Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Councilman Rennie?
Yes.
Councilwoman Sayoc?
Yes.
And the mayor votes yes, it passes unanimously, which will bring us to item number 7, which is our consideration of local emergency proclamation. Councilman Rennie, if you don't mind, I'm just going to take this as a normal agenda item. So I'll call on the staff presentation first and look for questions and comments from the council. So Mr. Andrews, I understand you're giving us the report on this.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Town Council. So when we first initiated the proclamation through the Town Manager's authority as the Director of Emergency Services, it was then ratified through resolution by the Town Council. And in that resolution, it was stated that we would return to Council within 60 days to either recommend ending the emergency proclamation or continuing it. As you can see in the staff recommendation, we're recommending to continue it primarily because A, the county is still under a state of proclamation of emergency, as is the state, and most of the local jurisdictions remain under the proclamation of local emergency. Part of that is predicated on the fact that once FEMA creates an incident, they don't close the incident until they feel it's reached a conclusion. And for reimbursement purposes, we would want to remain in a proclamation until the incident is actually closed by FEMA. And I'm available for any other questions.
Okay, thank you. So Councilman Rennie, I assume you have a question?
Sure. Your last comment is a good reason to do it. I wanted to pull it for two reasons. First of all, when I read through it, it looked to me like we'd already done everything in there. So there was a question in my mind whether we still needed to do it, especially when you put it in the backdrop of the cases in our county are dropping. The governor's planning to open up retail with curbside retail this Friday. The governor has said that, our hospitalization rates have stabilized. Our testing has improved. There's a sufficient inventory of the PPE, the personal protective equipment. And they have an array of 20,000 trackers ready to track contacts of positive tested people. In our county, we've dropped from about an average of 60 to 65 cases a day. Now we're averaging somewhere in the low 20s, it looks like. I saw 21 2 days ago, but 65 again yesterday. So it looks like the emergency is abating. The second reason I wanted to pull it is I felt like rubber stamping this without comments also is rubber stamping the county's current state of emergency, which I wanted to comment on also. Maybe I'll ask some questions and then comment on that after, if that's okay, if I do in that order.
We do not have anyone registered to speak on this. So I think that we're going to have council questions. I'll then confirm with Ms. Neese that there are no speakers registered for this item. So first I'll go to other council members and see if they have a question. I'll say, Mr. Andrews, I have just a confirming question of my understanding is that in order to be eligible for FEMA funds, if and when they become available, is you're advising us that we should keep this emergency proclamation in place. Is that correct?
That is my advice. The county proclamation would be one piece of the puzzle to be eligible for reimbursement. However, also having it at the local jurisdictional level just presents a stronger case to FEMA if and when we do apply for reimbursable expenses.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Seah.
Yes, question of staff. So should the county change their emergency proclamation? Are we able to change ours before the end of this?
That would be a yes. So for instance, the emergency proclamation doesn't necessarily do anything to preclude this council from taking policy actions. It's really kind of an umbrella for advising, mutual aid recipients and also mutual aid folks that we'd be reaching out to that we're doing this under a proclamation of emergency. To date, we have followed the guidance of the public health officials in the county, and the governor has been, working with his advisors at the state level. And the governor, I believe, said in his statements this week that, folks should still heed the advice at the local level, but at the state level, when he looks at the aggregate numbers at the state level, he feels comfortable at the state level. Our county also recently released guidance where they're tracking very similar metrics localized just to our county. And based on how they view those metrics, similar to the governor's kind of comments, they will then decide how they can continue to reopen different segments of the county.
Any other questions at this point rather than comments?
Mayor?
Okay, see.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I was wondering.
Ms. Trivedi.
One other comment that the advantage of having our local emergency proclamation is that it does provide us local powers to implement the public health order and to respond to the emergency in ways that might be unique to Los Gatos. And if we don't have this emergency proclamation, our ability to do those unique items is very much inhibited. So that's another reason why staff is recommending that we continue the proclamation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions as opposed to comments? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to confirm with Ms. Neese as to whether or not any member of the public has asked to speak to us, comment, or submitted any kind of written document with respect to item 7.
That is correct.
Okay, so given that there is no public comment, I'm going to close the public portion of the meeting and look to the council for comments or a motion. Councilman Rennie.
Thank you. I'd like to make comments, as I mentioned before. I did have some more questions about our proclamation, but I think the reason for that Mr. Andrews gave of making sure that we're eligible for the emergency FEMA funds is a good reason to keep it in place. Even when I read through it, I don't see that a lot of it is anything new we need to do. It's, you know, when we first did an emergency, it's like, oh my God, we need to mobilize and do all this stuff. And now everything is kind of in place. And so that was one of my reasons. So I'm going to skip the question, any more questions on that. The other comment I wanted to make is on the county, their state of the emergency. One of the better health strategists reading that I read, they called the way to deal with this as the hammer and the dance. I don't know if anybody else has seen that. You immediately hammer the virus down by shutting everything down. And our county health executive did a great job at doing that early. The second part they call the dance. And what that means is you need to keep the infection rate below 1. That's that R naught number below 1 so that it's not growing exponentially. There's different, so by starting to open up, you could, if you had sufficient confidence in data, pick certain things you could open up that would contribute a little bit to the infection rate. And you could do things to keep, and they call it a dance because you can open certain things to allow more economic activity to occur. Because remember, this is a balance. We have people that are suffering. There's people with plenty of financial wherewithal, and it's, you know, we don't suffer nearly as bad as those people that have been living paycheck to paycheck. So we need to get back to letting more of those kinds of people work. The ordinance we have later on to prevent evictions helps only in immediately making sure they aren't thrown out and have more chance of getting the virus, but they're still going to owe the rents unless something else changes. So that's a little bit of help, but it doesn't solve these people's problems. So that's why I think this dance is important. And I think the county, our infection rate, as I mentioned, the average had dropped from 65 to in the low 20s now per day. You look at our, and the other thing you don't want to do is overwhelm the hospitals. We're using about, round numbers, about 100 of 900 ventilators in the county. So we're very well prepared if it goes up a little bit. Of course, we don't want it to get out of control, and that's why you call it a dance. I don't see us doing enough of the moving the balance to allowing people to work yet from the county, despite the fact that our R naught is clearly well below 1. And by just rubber stamping this, sorry for the term, on consent, I felt like we were rubber stamping the county's state of the emergency, which I'm, as you can see, thinking that it needs a little adjustment.
Okay, thank you for that, Councilman Rennie. I'm just going to ask a question of Mr. Andrews or Ms. Privetti. This emergency proclamation is not part and parcel of, nor does it effectuate the county health shelter-in-place order. Is that correct?
That is correct. This council still has policy discretion as you choose. As I mentioned, to date, we have followed the policy direction of the county health official, but this emergency proclamation does not wed you to that.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Sack, you had your hand up.
Yes, question, but clarification. So I want to reiterate Council members Rennie's comments. I think that was the impetus behind Cities Association letter that the mayor signed, is that I think all of our council members are feeling what kind of dance is necessary to move us forward, and having that conversation so that we can contribute and share what we are experiencing here within the town as the county looks at how they start to lift their shelter in place. One thing I did want to ask staff is if you could clarify what it means when staff says it doesn't prevent us from doing our own policies. If the shelter in place remains, we still have to keep certain industries closed if the county keeps those industries closed. Is that correct?
So to give an example, 2 of our local jurisdictions went ahead and made wearing masks in public mandatory, even though that was not part of the stipulated guidelines by the county. And so to that extent, that's why I say this council still has policy authority. That being said, you would probably want to consult with the town attorney if you were going to do something in direct opposition to the county health official. But, you know, this council has taken action on the rent moratorium. This council has taken several policy actions that weren't necessarily part and parcel of the county health officials' guidelines.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions and/or a motion? Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor, for your indulgence, letting me discuss this item. I will go ahead and make a motion to accept staff's recommendation to continue this, mostly on the idea that we would like to make sure that we get reimbursed.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor for approval. Vice Mayor.
I'm going to second it. And although I certainly understand what Mr. Rennie and Ms. Sayoc were saying, as I've reported over the past several months, I do attend or participate in, I should say, all of the county's report outs on the COVID and what the county is doing. And when people ask me, well, what's going on, Barbara? What's going to happen? And people normally look for a black and white answer. This is going to open then, and that's going to open at another time. We're going to be dealing with iterations, and we're going to be dealing with a very layered response, and it's not going to all be the same. I think the county is doing a good job for our county and the number of infections we've had and the time that they started. And so I definitely am supportive of the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments or discussion on the motion? We see none. Again, a roll call. Vice Mayor.
Yes.
Councilman Rennie.
Yes.
Councilwoman Sayoc.
Yes.
Mayor votes yes, it passes unanimously. Which brings us to item number 8, which has also been pulled, but it's been pulled by written communications we've received by the public, which is interesting in that, Ms. Neese, do we have any member of the public registered to speak on this item?
Yes, we have 2.
Okay. And are either one of those persons who were request to pull the item from consent?
No, they are not.
Okay. All right, given that, I'm just going to treat this like a normal agenda item and take the public comment after the staff report and council questions. So given that, Ms. Velasco, I understand that you are going to at least start us with the report on this item.
Yes, I am. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Town Council. Lisa Velasco, Human Resources Director. Before you tonight for consideration is a recommendation to approve addenda to the TEA and AFSCME Memorandums of Understanding related to reopener language to negotiate salary in the 3rd year of each agreement. Representatives of the town have met and conferred in good faith with each group within the parameters authorized by the Town Council and reached tentative agreements to provide a 1% across the board increase effective July 1, plus a one-time non-PERSable lump sum bonus amount equivalent to 2% of annual salary prior to the 1% increase. To maintain parity amongst the unrepresented employee groups, the town manager recommends the same provisions be applied to the management and confidential groups, and that the 1% across the board increase be applied to the temporary group. The anticipated fiscal impact for all recommended salary adjustments in fiscal year 2020-21 is $433,338 and reduced to $183,476 for subsequent fiscal years. This concludes my report, and staff is available to answer questions.
So thank you, Ms. Velasco. I'm going to do anticipating questions and comments. I'm going to ask for basically a multiple staff report before we get started with our questions. So Mr. Schultz, there have been a lot of written comments and questions regarding the process of closed session with respect to this item. And you've given us some information. Could you provide that to the public as well without disclosing what you're not supposed to disclose about closed session?
Yes, thank you very much. The council goes through labor negotiations every time the contract is up. In this case, although it was a 3-year contract, the contract specifically stated that in the 3rd year, there would be what we call a reopener, and it was limited only to salaries. So in other words, we weren't discussing working conditions or benefits or anything that is included in a normal negotiations. The only thing that could be discussed was salaries. Those negotiations began at the early part of this year. As typical, we begin by going into closed session, the negotiating team, which included management staff that is familiar with finances and classification of employees, and it also included an outside attorney who is an expert in labor negotiations in the Bay Area market. The labor negotiating team takes complete direction from the council as a whole. It doesn't negotiate without direction from council. I went through and obtained direction from council prior to the coronavirus. And then after the coronavirus hit, it met again with council in closed session to provide further direction. Once that is reached, based on the direction from council, and a tentative agreement can be reached, hopefully with the bargaining units, then it's only a tentative agreement. Then that tentative agreement has to come to open session and be approved or not approved in open session. And that's where we are today. It's only a tentative agreement. Council has the ability to approve that agreement or not approve that agreement. If it doesn't approve that agreement, then we do have to go back into negotiations with the bargaining units. As our HR director mentioned, we do have to meet and confer and bargain in good faith to try to reach an agreement before the July 1st deadline. If there's any other questions, I'm available.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Schultz. And I'm going to ask council to indulge me by deferring questions until we get to determine whether or not Ms. Privetti or Mr. Andrews, do you have anything to add on this matter before we start with questions?
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to just add that the town council was provided economic information in closed session. So that way the council had full information. Of course, we're in a very dynamic environment. Revenues are being affected. And so the proposal before you is budgetarily sound, and our budget is going to be released publicly later this week. And so all of those forecasts and details will be made public to everyone, and we will be holding our budget hearing on May 19th. So there's additional information. In addition, you did receive a desk item that contained public comments as well as corrections to some of the assertions that were made in public comment, and we're available to answer any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Andrews, I'm assuming that you'll respond to questions, but don't have a further statement now. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. So thank you very much, members of the staff. I'm going to open it now to council for questions. Ms. Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Our town attorney referenced that if this proposal is not accepted by the council this evening, the matter would go back to closed session. Is there also an opportunity to do something else, i.e. continue the matter to the next agenda?
Yes, that absolutely is a solution or a alternative for council as it continue to another meeting.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, seeing none, Ms. Neese, I'm going to ask you to queue up the 2 persons who are registered to speak with us. And however you want to do that.
The first speaker will be.
And while Ms. Neese is getting that done, for those of you who are speaking, this is just like a normal council meeting. You have 3 minutes to make your comments. You don't have to use the entire 3 minutes, but you have 3 minutes. You will be timed. And once you finish your comments, then please pause for a bit to see if any of the members of the council have a question for you, and then we'll move to the next speaker. And when you are recognized, if you just give us your name, please, we'd appreciate it.
So Mayor, I do not have anyone that is specific for item number 8, and no one has raised their hand here that indicating that they want to speak on this.
Okay, so.
Sorry, Mayor, I will confirm that I just tried to allow one of the attendees to speak, and it appears as if they've chosen not to. I took them off mute and gave them the allow to speak function. If you'd like, I could go through to the next individual and see if they want to speak if I allow them the function.
Why don't you just take a second to do that and then advise us?
It appears as if the second individual, the second resident, is also choosing not to unmute once I provided access for them to be able to speak.
Okay, thank you very much for making sure of that. Given that we have no public comment here at this meeting, the council is well aware that we received many written communications, most of them in opposition to what we're considering this evening. But none of those persons are here to speak with us this evening. Are there any further questions of staff before I open it up for comments and/or motion from the council? Okay, seeing no further questions, if I hadn't said it before, I'm closing the public portion of the hearing, and I will look to council for comments or motion. Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to move this meeting right along and make a motion. My motion is that we approve the addenda to the Town Employees Association and American Federation of State and Municipal Employees Memoranda of Understanding and revisions to the classification plans for the unrepresented management, confidential, and temporary units. I have said throughout this COVID crisis that what I personally want the town to do is lead by example and model the behavior that we would like to see others follow. I am well aware that this is a raise. I'm also well aware that the people who are getting this raise are incredibly deserving, are incredibly hardworking, and have come to us in good faith to bargain and put themselves on the line. Yes, there are people who have lost their jobs, but we as a town had budgeted for this expense. We've made sure that we can absorb it into our budget, which will be considered next week. And if we have the opportunities to support those who work for us and work for the town, I would like us to do that. We don't need to put another person on furlough or have them collect unemployment if the town can pay them a reasonable salary for what they're worth. And this is a contract we had 3 years ago to reopen this year. We bargained in good faith. We can support it. We need to remain competitive with other municipalities who have in fact given their employees raises. We are in the position to not furlough. We're very lucky. I'm probably going to get no seconds to this, but I'm making my speech anyway, because I want us to model behavior that I would hope other employers would take in maintaining employment, paid employment for those who are working for them if they can. So my motion is that we approve and adopt this agenda item. Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. I will second with comment. And I'd like to thank all the people that also wrote in and gave us their opinion, because it really represents what we, the council, went through. We were already partially through negotiations when this hit. And you can look and see, and we ended up having 2 closed sessions in order to get through this. So it wasn't an easy, light decision for us. I think one thing that's really important when I think about it is when you've done negotiations and you've negotiated in good faith, you don't want to back out and say, oh, sorry, you know, next time somebody's not going to negotiate with you, or they're not going to trust you. And I think that's an important part for me also. We did this is a compromise. The expectations of the employees were greater, and they were disappointed at what this is. And some of the public is disappointed what this is. So I guess that's what you get for a compromise. Everybody's disappointed, but I'm going to second it and go ahead with what we have worked out. We have put a lot of work to get to this point on this item.
Thank you, Councilman Rennie. Any other comments or questions on the motion before I call the question? Councilwoman Sayah.
Thank you. So I do want to also comment and say thank you to those who've provided public comments, because based on the letters that were submitted, there were some areas where the town needed to clarify the process. And thank you, Mr. Schultz, for doing so. That closed session was appropriate, but there's one area where I think some people provided suggestive comments for how to improve the process. One was they wanted to hear all the council members provide an explanation of their vote, which I'm happy to do. And then the second was a suggestion on how to improve the process for next year. And one in particular that I liked was the suggestion that was provided of how Menlo Park does it, where prior to any negotiations, a staff report goes out, giving all parties as well as the public the same financial information, so that we all have the information in front of us. Comments are made before negotiations begin rather than after, that such as the situation we're in. But nevertheless, as has been stated, we did, as a council under closed session, authorize our negotiating team to move forward. There were 4 closed sessions. We understand the situation, the economic situation we're in. During closed session, we were assured by our staff that no one would be furloughed and that services would not be cut. I understand that it would have been an ideal situation where the budget was coming out before this, so that the same financial information we have is available to the public. But nevertheless, I want to just reiterate the points that Mayor Jensen made forward, is that we have been trying to model the behavior we as a community have been asking of others. We've been asking those that have the means to forgive rent. We've done that with our tenants. We've asked those that can give more to those who are serving to do so. We've done that with our community service providers. And we also have asked those that have provided commitments to honor those commitments, whether they're foundations or nonprofits. And we began negotiations in February. We're at a point where we are now, where we basically want to acknowledge our staff for the work that they're doing, the work that they have continued to do. And that acknowledgement is through a 1% cost of living increase. And I want to just stress that most of our colleagues have 3.5% CPI increases. And what we've decided that we can fiscally do is a 1% cost of living increase. And that was done in balance, not only with the financial situation but we're also trying to improve and promote morale to our staff so that they understand that we understand the sacrifices they've made during these closures. And frankly, we want them to remain committed to providing the services in the future that we are asking of them to do. And so people have asked for explanation of the vote. I'm giving it to you. I understand there will be people that will be disappointed, but one thing I do want our public to understand, and what I really want to make clear, there was no greedy power move. There was nothing mischievous. It was strictly a good faith negotiation by all parties. And I hope that the anger that people are putting in their letters is not shared with our staff, because they have been doing remarkable work and they certainly deserve this acknowledgement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sayoc. Any other comments before I call the question, Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I said a little bit earlier about the COVID issue, it's going to be resolved and it's going to move forward in layers, in iterations. And that's sort of the same as I feel about the issue that is before us this evening. On the one hand, yes, we did have 4 closed sessions in which the issue of benefits to staff was debated. Obviously, if you have 4 sessions, it was not a straight line. We discussed things, we had different votes, not everybody agreed. Sometimes it's a little bit awkward discussing closed sessions because there's certain things you can say and certain things you can't say. But the bottom line is that it was a debated issue and there were different mindsets as amongst the council members that got us to where we are now. The second thing is I actually agreed with the letters that we received on this issue. I did think that it is unsettling to give people bonuses and a raise when we have so many folks who are really struggling in our town and in our community. So those letters struck a responsive chord with me. What doesn't strike a responsive chord with me, though, is that people send in emails and then nobody shows up at our meeting. Showing up at our meeting and saying what's on your mind, whether it's on Zoom or in our council chambers, is actually very important to me. It shows a level of commitment that each of us make every time that we prepare for and then appear for our council meetings. So where I was going to go with this is I was going to support a continuance to our next budget meeting to revisit whether or not, the amount of money that it's going to be increased or the demands upon our budget should be considered publicly within the context of our entire budget. But for the reasons I just stated, I am going to go ahead and support the motion.
All right, thank you, council members, for your comments. We do have a motion and a second that's on the floor. I'm going to call the question by roll call. Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Councilman Rennie?
Yes.
Councilwoman Sayoc?
Yes.
Mayor votes yes, it passes unanimously. And we'll move on to item 14.
Mayor, may I make a
Yes.
supplemental motion?
Yes, you may.
As I mentioned, one of the suggestions that I thought would be helpful for future negotiations is the model that was shared with Menlo Park. It was submitted today, so I'm not sure if everyone had a chance to see it, but it was a staff report that provides the financial information to all parties as well as the public and gives an opportunity to have a full disclosure of what negotiations would be. My motion is to follow that model for next year as we begin next year's contract negotiations.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Yeah, I'm going to second that. I thought that was a good idea too.
And I'm going to ask the maker of the motion because, well, perhaps I should ask a process question of Ms. Pavetti, just to inquire whether it would be appropriate when and if we get to the point where we're doing a policy committee meeting to have this issue. I also saw the Menlo Park. I thought it was really interesting. But my question is it appropriate for this to go to the policy committee to develop a process by which we are going to accomplish this, or should we simply say we're going to do it? So Vice Mayor first, I saw your hand first.
Yes, it would seem, well, first of all, I personally think it could go straight through without going to the policy committee. But if it's going to go to some committee, I believe it should be the finance committee.
Okay, Councilwoman Sayoc, I saw your hand.
I'll amend my motion to clarify that process-wise, which committee it goes to, I'm open as long as the staff report goes out prior to next year's budget negotiations.
Okay, so
So
before I
Mayor,
call on you, well, let's get Councilman Rennie before Mr. Andrews, you say anything so that we can get all the council comments in before you respond. So Councilman Rennie?
Thank you. I was just gonna say, I also like the idea And now that we've seen it's been done somewhere else, and I guess it worked out, maybe we should check with them to make sure that it worked out. We've usually been advised that when you're going into a negotiation, you don't want to tip your hand. So the information you provide, like if you gave information what a 3% raise was, then that says you're thinking about a 3% raise. So you need to think about providing information in a way that doesn't tip your hand to the other side. You know, maybe you have to put 1, 2, 3 through 10. I don't know what it takes, but it's going to take a little bit of thought. And so, you know, maybe the policy committee is a better place to discuss that. I'm not sure.
Okay, Mr. Andrews.
I was just going to let you know, Mayor, that the town manager has her hand raised.
Oh, thank you. Ms. Privetti.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to let you know that we did have a short staff discussion about this because we thought that there might be some interest on the part of our council to pursue a policy like this. This kind of policy is a meet and confer item. So while we could discuss the initial parameters of what a policy for Los Gatos might look like with our council committee, please know that it is a meet and confer. So there's going to be a lot more process before this can be put into place. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Privetti. So I'm going to suggest perhaps Councilwoman Sayoc that you go forward with your motion for us to implement a process much like we saw with Menlo Park, and that the council get informed about what that might look like and how we might want to develop it, given what the potential ramifications are for contract negotiation.
And Mayor, sorry to interrupt, but the town attorney also has his hand raised.
I can't see the hands raised, so thank you. Mr. Schultz.
That's okay. I just want to say, yes, it definitely should be done as a policy, just as Menlo Park had done. And, you know, it's definitely not the majority that do that process, but I would say it's a very minority and a very small minority, but it's certainly something the town of Los Gatos could do. But we do need to bring that forward as a policy document, whether that goes to the policy committee, whether that goes to the finance committee, or directly to council. And then it would have to be negotiated. In regards to Rob Rennie, if you actually look at the staff reports, they are very generalized. They just talk about the economic condition. They don't provide any of that tipping of the hat as to what negotiations, as to percentages or anything of that nature. It's just basically an economic picture of the negotiations, and that council is beginning to go into those negotiations. So certainly we can look at that policy if that's the direction of council.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. So given all that information, Councilwoman Sayoc, how would you like to state your motion?
Okay, my motion as stated, the intent of the motion is to provide as much financial information to all parties as well as the public before labor negotiations begin. I defer to staff and our town attorney on what is appropriate given the meet and confer and labor negotiation rules that are in place. But again, what I'm looking for is a policy similar to what Menlo Park has done that provides as much transparency and sharing of information so that we have an ability to share with our resident what the fiscal situation of our town is before we begin any negotiations.
Okay, thank you. Does that make sense to the seconder, and do you retain your second, Vice Mayor?
I'm retaining my second, and I also want to throw out a thank you to the community member or members who sent in the Menlo Park exemplar.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Council, before I call the question, any comments on that motion other than what we've already heard? Okay, seeing none. Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Councilman Rennie?
Yes.
Councilwoman Sayoc?
Yes.
Mayor votes yes, it passes unanimously. Thank you, staff, for that information. Which brings us to item 14, which is a consideration of an extension of the emergency moratorium that was initially passed on, I believe it was March 24th. Mr. Schultz, I think you're giving us the staff report.
Excuse me,
Yes.
Mayor, this is Shelley.
Hi.
You want to do verbal communications before you get to that?
Oh, gosh. Yes, I'm sorry. It's always at a time in the agenda where I don't think about it. As I understand it, we have 2 verbal communications this evening, or 1?
We have 2, and they're both
2.
Registered and online.
Okay, so Christina Taroni, would you like to speak to us?
Hi there.
Hi,
Hi, am I on the camera? I'm sorry.
your picture's on the camera, but it's just a picture of you. It's a still picture, but we can hear you just fine.
Hi there. Thanks for taking the time to hear me out. I just wanted to start by saying that I'm just not really anybody. I have a daughter. Who is at Los Gatos High School, and she's a senior. So that hasn't been too much fun. But she and I have been volunteering since the beginning for about 7 weeks. Just to give you a quick history, I started delivering meals to Good Samaritan Hospital. I was picking up meals from Alex at flights. And from there, I just fast forward, I got involved with the Chamber of Commerce. I introduced the Chamber of Commerce when they were transitioning and low on funds to Frontline Foods. I handled sort of a coordinator with the restaurants and the hospital staff. And so what I'm trying to say is I've really experienced everything at the low level, what's happening in the hospitals as well as what's happening in the local businesses. So I guess now it's time for me to read my letter. Is that how I do this?
Yes, please.
Okay, sorry. I'm a concerned resident of Los Gatos. For the last 7 weeks, I have volunteered as an ambassador for Feed the Need, Feed Our Heroes, and served as a volunteer restaurant and hospital coordinator for Frontline Foods / World Central Kitchen Silicon Valley chapter, as well as being involved in fundraising for both organizations. My daughter and I have been delivering over 500 meals 4 days per week to local hospitals in an effort to help the restaurants and the Los Gatos Chamber of Commerce. I'm writing to you to bring forth ideas about shelter in place and the possibility of bringing our local downtown economy back to normalcy. There is such a thing. The concepts presented here are suggested to create a win-win solution for Los Gatos and our local business community, considering the parameters we have to work with. Since there has been discussion how to bring patrons back to restaurants while protecting public health, I propose we consider closing down Los Gatos streets like North Santa Cruz from Bachman to Main Street and or possibly side streets. Originally, I was thinking maybe Thursday, Friday, Saturday evenings from 5 to 9. This was just an idea. And on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday from maybe 1 to 8 p.m., allowing restaurants to use the increased street area to extend the maximum seating with social distancing. Bringing restaurant seating into the street will help, increase seating area allowance if they are faced with a maximum of a 25% capacity of seating. Tables can be stand up and placed on X's or O's or operated by our trusted business community. The town of Los Gatos may consider allowing use of the town parks for picnic dinners delivered by local restaurants. Since there will be no music in the park or jazz in the plaza events, Los Gatos could allow live music on occasions during family-oriented picnic nights. The concept could possibly be called dining in the park or dinner in the plaza. Local restaurants could deliver menu items to patrons at tables properly distanced apart who obtain advanced reservations.
Excuse me, Mayor, time is up.
Ms. Taroni, why don't you finish with your ideas? You don't have to read your letter verbatim, but because I know that we've all read it, so you can summarize your remaining ideas.
Okay. Basically, I just thought it would be a great idea since I have attended events in the past as a resident where there was the sip and stroll and the wine walk. And, I had a feeling that it's going to be very difficult for a lot of these businesses to even stay in business if there's no tables left. A lot of these tiny restaurants are not able. I'm talking with them on a daily basis, and if they get cut to 4 tables, they're going to let go staff. And a lot of them are already told me they are closing. And it's really sad to me. And I really was hoping that, I didn't know which avenue to to go, and that's why I reached out to the Chamber of Commerce. And then it was suggested that I reach out to the town.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you there and see if anyone has any questions for you. I don't see any, but I will let you know. I'll get back to Councilwoman Sayoc. I will let you know that the town has made it known in various forums that we are looking for ideas just like yours from the community at large, and that we're kind of collecting them and looking for things that we can do when the new state regulations come out and the new county regulations, if there are any new regulations come out, we're going to actively consider all of these ideas. So thank you very much to contributing to that. So Councilwoman Sayoc.
Actually, that was my question. Thank you, Ms. Tirone, but my question was to put this on staff's parking lot of events to consider and prepare for as we celebrate a shelter-in-place lifting. Thank you.
It's getting to be a big parking lot. Thank you very much, Ms. Tirone, and thanks for registering and letting us know your ideas. Thank you very much. And we have one other speaker. Who is Catherine Summers. Ms. Summers, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, Mayor. I'm still waiting for Ms. Summers to unmute herself.
Okay. Can you do it for her, Mr. Andrews?
What I'm able to do is notify them that they now have the ability to unmute themselves. And so the attendee would have to unmute themselves.
Okay.
Ms. Summers, if you can hear the broadcast, you appear to not be able to unmute yourself. I'm not sure if you're having technical difficulties, but if you would like to speak, you've been given the option. I see that Randy Chen might be taking the option instead, so I will give Randy Chen the ability to speak.
Okay. I'm guessing Catherine is having technical difficulties, so I'm Randy Chen, you know who I am. Catherine, text me what you want me to say, but the chamber would just like to say that all these ideas that you're considering, we would like to help you to the extent that we can in organizing and all that type of thing. As you know, we probably cannot put any financial backing behind any of that because our budget, just like everyone else's, is dwindling. But we are certainly available to help with organizing and contacting any of the businesses or doing anything that would make it easier for you guys to sort of to put on these events or, you know, any of these ideas that have been coming to you. And
Ms. Chen, thank you very much for that offer. The council is appreciative and fortunate to have such a good relationship with its business community and chamber right now. And we will definitely be calling on those who want to volunteer time and efforts to help us when we get to that point. Councilwoman Sayoc?
Yes, a question of Ms. Chen.
Sure.
Thank you. I know there's always this tension between people who want to drive and park downtown. And so the only thing I would ask Chamber in preparation for this conversation, if you could just do as you always do, a poll of your business owners of how much the lack of being able to drive downtown and park downtown on the street would affect their decision and their support of this idea.
Sure. You know, when we know have more details, we'd be happy to do a poll to that extent. And Catherine is telling me that she cannot unmute for some reason. Mr. Andrews, can you maybe try unmuting her again?
Mr. Andrews indicated that the only thing he can do is tell them to unmute. So if you will, Ms. Chan and Ms. Summers, if you can hear us, we are going to make the assumption that your views are much the same as Ms. Chen. And thank you for registering and trying to unmute. Are there any other persons who are registered for verbal communication? Okay, we're going to move on then to item 14. And thanks to those of you who did actually participate. Thank you. We are getting used to figuring out how to do this, hopefully for not too much longer. Item 14, as I said earlier, is a consideration of extending the emergency moratorium that we put in place at the end of March, because I guess the time is up. So Mr. Schultz, can you give us a report on that, please?
Yes, good evening again. On March 24th of this year, the town council adopted an interim urgency ordinance for a moratorium on evictions due to non-payment of rent due to the coronavirus, COVID-19. The interim urgency ordinance was adopted pursuant to Government Code Section 65858, which provides that it can be adopted and shall remain in effect for only 45 days unless extended for an additional period up to 2 years. Approval of the extension will require a 4/5 vote. The initial 45-day period of the moratorium will expire on May 8th unless council adopts the proposed ordinance extending the moratorium. The ordinance provided is pretty much identical to the ordinance that was provided on March 24th. I have added a few whereases in the ordinance that have occurred since March 24th. And I also have a section that incorporates any orders from the County of Santa Clara and the governor. And with that, I'm open for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Schultz? Okay, I actually have one, Mr. Schultz. In light of our discussion regarding the emergency proclamation, I just want to make sure that this emergency moratorium is really providing relief for certain things that are going on that we want to, for like evictions, etc. But it has nothing to do with the shelter in place order. Is that correct? Other than the fact that because you're sheltering in place, you may not be able to pay your rent, but it does not endorse or lobby against or any way make a comment on the current county health order, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So given that, I see no other questions. Have any members of the public, Ms. Neese, registered to speak with us on this item?
Not for this item specifically, but I see Catherine has her hand raised.
Okay, only if she can unmute.
So similar to last time, we've enabled her and we have sent her an unmute message. We'll give her a minute to see if she's able to do it again.
I recognize that the technology may be somewhat frustrating. I know that Ms. Summers is familiar with this platform, so perhaps it's something that the town needs to work on for future meetings.
As if she's now left as an attendee.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we will put that on our long list of kinks to work out with how this works. Given that, I'm going to close the public portion of the hearing and look to the council for any further questions. If no questions, comments, and or a motion. Councilwoman Sayak.
I move that we adopt the extension of the interim urgency ordinance by title only, extending the temporary moratorium on evictions due to non-payment of rent for residential tenants where the failure to pay rent results from income loss resulting from COVID-19 and suspending all deadlines related to land use entitlements.
Vice Mayor.
Second.
Comments before I call the question? Okay, roll call vote. Vice Mayor.
Yes.
Councilman Rennie?
Yes.
Councilwoman Sayak?
Yes.
Mayor votes yes. It passes unanimously. And that concludes our business for this evening. And for those of you frustrated with our Zoom process, we will work on the issues that might have prevented you from joining us this evening and hope you'll try again on May 19th, when we will consider the budget.
Mayor, before
Anything-
I need
Oh,
to-
you have to read it. Yes, please.
An intra-emergency ordinance of the town of Los Gatos extending a temporary moratorium on evictions due to non-payment of rent for residential tenants where the failure to pay rent results from income loss resulting from the novel coronavirus COVID-19 and suspending all deadlines related to land use entitlements.
Thank you very much, Ms. Neese. I apologize. Any final words from council members before we say good evening?
Stay safe. It takes
Stay
a town.
safe. It takes a town. Go enjoy your in-home margarita. Happy Cinco de Mayo. Good night, everyone.